I'd like to welcome Jen back to the show. If you've seen the last few episodes, you're probably getting used to seeing her. She's been a staple on the show. So thanks for coming back. And today's topic is going to be about age-related performance decline. I'm not getting any younger, so this is an important subject to me.
Neither am I. Hey, how you doing?
So far, so good. I mean, I think my allergies are bugging me a little bit. You know,
Yeah.
summertime's coming.
Are you getting a little freaked out by it? Like, uh-oh, I got COVID.
Yeah, every time
No, that's just allergies.
Yeah. I mean, I think for me, it's like I can kind of like pick the two apart and kind of figure it out.
Yeah.
But like you do have that like split second, like where you're like, oh God, I got it this time.
I know. I do the same thing. It's hilarious.
Yeah.
So I've been meaning to ask you, how was your ride the other day back there in Boulder Canyon and
Oh yeah.
Left-Hand Canyon and so forth? You were going to go out and crush some Strava records.
It did not happen. I did not crush a single record. So I warmed up. I parked in North Boulder and then rode out the Lions and then came back. And then I was going to get a run and go, like coming back down 36 and then take that right and like really rail that right-hander and then like head up to Jamestown.
Yeah.
As soon as I turned into Jamestown, it was the biggest headwind I've ever seen in my life.
Oh, Mother Nature was against you.
Yeah. I was like, this is not going to happen. But I did do, I think I did 10 more watts than I did in like whenever it was like 2010. I did 10 more watts, but I missed the PR by like a minute and 30.
The wind held you back, but you were producing more power. So, you would have beat it on a good day.
Yeah. I told myself, I'm like, well, don't be too hard on yourself. You put out more power. That's all you can do.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, cool.
It was pretty insane. It's like anytime I've been to Boulder lately, it's just been freaking horribly windy. And then I get out there and then I get lazy and then I'm riding by myself. So, I mean, out here in Lone Tree, it's like, I got my little loop. I do Hess, Surrey Ridge, Legay, Happy Canyon, Santa Fe, and then up Daniels Park.
Sure.
And then I do that new cutoff, like the canyons. Have you ridden back there? Like off of Hess? There's like a new loop that goes out, and it's pretty fun. I've been enjoying it. It's a good little 10-minute add-on to like make like an even 2 hours out of the loop I just was talking about.
Yeah.
Pretty cool. What about you? Did you get out this weekend and enjoy some warm weather?
Well, I did ride on Saturday. I did that VR4 Ironman virtual race and had a really great day. Felt really good. Like, good normalized power. Got 26 miles in about an hour and 12 minutes. So I was pretty happy with that. Yeah, it was smoking fast and
that's moving.
Averaged 21.6 miles per hour and had some punchy hills. So that was fun. And I want to get back out and ride Hess because somebody stole all my KQOMs.
Oh, wow.
And Strava over there. So I'm like, watch this.
I got to ask, what's your time on Hess?
God, I don't even remember, to be honest with you, but I want to say you're talking about just the climb segment there? That category 4?
I think it's split up into 2 sections maybe, but I usually run it like, it says the whole Hess climb. I think it's like is it like 2 miles or something like that?
Yeah, I think I've done it in, I want to say like an 8:16 or something.
That sounds about right.
Yeah, I don't remember my total time from like Chambers all the way to the turnoff at Havana. I also own that one, and it was stolen from me. So by the same chick.
Yeah, that
so
happens.
I got to go out and get it.
Did you ride out there Sunday?
No, I had a 10K I had to run on Sunday.
Oh, how'd that go?
It was painful.
Oh yeah, I bet.
Yeah, we had a 3K run on Friday, so threshold for just dropping the throttle for 2 miles. And then we had that 40K bike, and then we had the 10K on Sunday. And so by Sunday, I mean, I still ran a decent time, but my legs were cooked. They were. So I'm paying for it today.
Yeah, I took my brother out, and then I told him, I'm like, yeah, we'll do 2 hours zone two. And then I rode
Yeah.
like mid tempo.
You just can't help
Yeah,
yourself.
yeah, yeah. I was like, dude, I was like, yeah, man, I'm just gonna ride tempo. And then we're like climbing up Hess, and then I looked back and started pulling away from him. And
Uh-huh.
I was riding like mid tempo, and I really believe he was actually trying to stay zone two because
Yeah.
that's what his plan said. And then he works construction, so he has to like kind of stick to his plan so he can like be rested for his hard days.
Sure.
And then I took him out and like made him ride tempo. He was like, dude, he's like, we've been averaging however many watts. He's like, this isn't zone two. I'm like, well, I was like, yeah, my average power says zone two. He's like, dude, you said you were doing 260 watts up Hess. I'm like, yeah, but my overall 2 hour average is like 160.
Yeah, you can't help yourself. You
Yeah.
just feel so good.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and then we're kind of like making a joke how everyone uses zone two. They're like, yeah, I'm just going to go out and ride zone two. And then they just wick it up just a little bit past zone two. It
Yeah.
always turns
Yeah.
into that.
No,
Yeah.
I'm a slave to it. It's what's made me faster.
Yeah.
It's an interesting thing because I hung up my bicycle and my running shoes for a while because I had an ACL reconstruction in 2007,
Yeah.
and just some residual damage from that. I had not been competing, and then one of my athletes that I was coaching actually dared me to race. Um, it's kind of funny in
Yeah.
2015. So I said, all right, I'll do one race with you guys. And then
Uh,
it was done from there. But what's funny is I just have gotten faster every year since 2015,
oh, wow.
even
That's
though
awesome.
I'm aging. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's fun for me.
Yeah. It's kind of weird because I've had some of the same injuries too. And congrats on pushing through the ACL surgery
Yeah.
because I've had two of
Thanks.
those. And
Yes.
out of everything I've ever broken, hurt, like the knees are the worst ever because you're in a joint and then you get all that fluid in there and then you have to like work
Mm-hmm.
into some sort of like mobility again. And
Yeah.
then I've done my Achilles and then knees, but the knees are the worst ever to get
Yeah,
over.
they're tough. They're tough. I actually coach 5 athletes with ACL reconstructions, and I think it's been beneficial for them to have me as a coach because I know what they're going through.
Yeah, it's horrible. It's painful. I
Yeah.
mean, I think I did one, well, I did both of mine in 1 year. So that was a bad year. And then I had the year that I
Wow.
did my Achilles tendon. I've had so much physical therapy that
Yeah.
they would just allow me to work as a physical therapist. Like I know, I know.
You know
Yeah.
all the conditioning and the
Yeah.
mobility work.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
know it all. I'm like, I got cred here, we're good.
Yeah.
But
All
yeah,
right.
I kind of like the whole like aging and like getting, being an older athlete. I'm kind of fascinated by that because, I'm 47 and then I've been comparing like my power to when I was like younger. And then
Uh-huh.
I'm actually producing more power. Garmin has me, higher, my VO2 max higher than it's ever been. So
Uh-huh.
then I see all these scientific reports about like everyone declining when they get older. And I know to a certain extent you will,
Yeah.
but I'm not seeing it. And I'm the
Yeah.
old guy they're talking about.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I don't
Right.
know if it's because I have a stress-free life since I don't have like a big family. I do like my rides and then I just come back and like lay around all day in my pajamas and I don't have any extra stressors. So that might actually help me recover and be able to go hard more often.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, do you think aging is a disease?
Well, that's a good question. I think I mean, I think you can view it as a disease. I'm not sure it's a disease. Definitely, there's some genetic
Yeah.
component to it. We're just hardwired to not survive. It sucks. I mean, be nice
Yeah.
for. I don't know. Actually, would it really be nice to survive and live generation after generation? I don't know. But
Here's me. I don't want to live. I mean, I never thought about living forever. It's never
yeah,
been like on my to-do list,
right,
you know?
right, yeah. But definitely, like, you know, if you get into the human genome and the DNA at the end of your DNA strands, there are
Mhm.
some genetic coding called telomeres. And what happens to those is every time they replicate, they actually get shorter. So geneticists believe that that is kind of the genetic signal to cell death. Like,
Oh, wow.
once those replicate so many times, then you start losing true genetic material, not just these little end caps, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they, there's a lot of scientists that believe that's kind of just actually like in our genetic makeup that we're not going to survive. Yeah.
That's insane. I've heard a lot of people talking about, is that, you say it, telomeres? Is that right?
Yeah.
I'm from
Yeah.
Alabama, so I say everything kind of weird.
Telomeres.
Telomeres. I've heard about that, and they're saying that that could be like a sign and like overall mortality, or like how long you might live. And then like Ben Greenfield, I don't know if you've ever like watched any of his stuff. He talks about telomeres all the time, and I can't remember all the stuff that he does. Talks about peptides and all this business to like try to increase his telomere length because he thinks that it's going to make him live longer, and like all this business. Like I don't think that you could actually do that, but it's kind of an interesting idea to think that, oh well, if I can stop the supposed shrinking telomeres, if I could keep them at like wherever they are right now, we'd be doing good, right?
Yeah. Well, I have some theory around that too. Like, if you're doing stuff that, is daily damaging your body, for example, smoking, that's one, like every time you suck on that cigarette, you're doing damage to your lung tissue, right? And so those cells have to repair. Well, how do they repair? They replicate. And so, you're damaging that genetic component to those cells. So I think, being smart about your choices and what, how you do your daily living probably slows that process down, but I don't think we can lengthen those. I think they are finite.
Yeah. I would buy that for sure. And a lot of times, like, I wonder, like, if older athletes lose performance because they lose passion for the sport, they lose drive to like train hard. I mean, do you think it's passion or just like the aging process that makes performance decline?
I think, well, how many things in your life have you stopped doing just because you got bored of it? I don't know.
I bounced back and forth. Like, I definitely quit skateboarding. So, and that was definitely age related.
Okay.
I can tell you that skateboarding
Not interest.
Skateboarding. Like, I skateboarded for the last time when I was like 41, and I started when I was like 7.
Okay.
So I actually quit in my 40s, but I quit because of my Achilles tendon, which was like that's what happens to old dudes. You blow your Achilles tendon out.
You just don't bounce as much, right?
Yeah. So without a doubt, skateboarding, quit that due to like being old. And then I started racing motocross, and then I haven't quit that yet, but I had to take a step back.
Sure.
Just 'cause I'm tired of getting hurt. But like, I kind of flip flop between motocross and bicycles.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. I mean, it probably takes about the same amount of time to train, right?
Yeah, it does.
You don't have all the time to do both. I'm kind of that way with triathlon and my horses.
Yeah.
Can't do both to the extent of what they both deserve to be good at it.
Yeah.
I think, though, to answer your question, certainly I think boredom can become a component. I'm not sure that aging really has much to do with it, other than sometimes we have to lower our expectations because we don't stay the same athlete we were once.
Yeah.
But I think people, when they set up kind of their performance goals per se, they kind of sort of back themselves into a corner to arrive at that decision, because maybe they really were not looking at this in a holistic way to begin with.
Yeah.
Like, for example, like if your goal is to get on the podium every time you race, and you can't control who shows up, and one day somebody, just a ringer, comes in and takes the podium away from you, does that make you lose your drive? And I think it does for people if that is the driving force behind why they're doing it. So I think, goal setting has a lot to do with longevity in sport. And frankly, I hope most people pick doing this because they actually love it versus winning or, the accolades that come with it.
I think I do it in a weird kind of way to accomplish goals that I have set, which, like, for whatever reason, it's like, yeah, I definitely would like to win some races. And I've won a
Mm-hmm.
few, like in my younger years, like mountain biking or whatever.
Uh-huh.
And I'd like to win some masters events, but a lot of the masters racers are so fast here. It's like, I don't even understand how you could even say that you get worse with aging, because the masters athletes in Colorado are so fast. It's insane. It's like,
Oh, I know.
yeah,
I know. Colorado is just stock full of really good athletes, from cycling to swimming to running. Endurance and in its whole
yeah,
bucket is just filled with really, really good athletes here.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think for me, it's like, I want to have my FTP as high as I can get it. That's a goal of mine.
Okay.
So then, I definitely want to win some races, but I've kind of shift my goals from being like more like you're saying, like trying to get on the top step, to like just daily hitting my workouts daily. That's a
Yeah.
goal.
Yeah. Yeah.
Breaking personal records. That's a goal.
Sure.
Staying healthy. That's a goal.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
through like linking all these consistent days of training, I've actually become faster than I was when I was like 25. And then I know we're talking about, VO2 max and all that business, which we'll get into that. But
Mm-hmm.
so then it kind of makes me wonder, should masters athletes dial it back, or just keep plugging at it just as hard as usual, or
Well, yeah, that's a kind of a case by case answer. I think certainly aging athletes require more recovery than they used to. Like, I don't know about you, but I would run a track meet on Saturday in high school, or a cross country meet, and I'd get up on Sunday morning and from bed, go down the stairs, and my calves would hurt. But as soon as I ate my breakfast and turned around, all that pain was gone.
Oh
And
yeah.
that doesn't happen anymore. I mean, I'm like
No.
hobbling around the house now, maybe for a day or a day and a half, actually having that same experience with my calves being tight, stairs hurting, et cetera, et cetera. So I think we have to be more intelligent about the recovery pieces that we make, but and then our choices too, with like how much intensity we're doing.
Yeah.
And I mean, things have changed drastically since you and I were kids. And I think that's partially why we continue to see PRs,
Oh
because
yeah.
we're kind of with the times, right? You're soaking in everything that you can get, every bit of information, learning about nutrition, learning about metabolism, learning about training, sweet spot, all of those things. We didn't know that stuff in the 80s, and we've gotten better and better as science has gotten better at teaching athletes how to train. So I think that's part of it, for sure. But I can tell you, I definitely have lost a step running. I mean, when I used to be able to run quarters at like like a 1/10 split again and again and again and again. I'm lucky if I can do it for 2 minutes. Like
Yeah.
barely, if I can hold like a 6-minute mile for a short interval, like 800 meters or whatever, I'm happy. Like, I'm
Oh yeah.
happy. But that
Yeah.
wouldn't
Yeah.
have even gotten me anywhere close to the top 6 in high school. So I've lost a step there. But cycling and swimming haven't. And I think it's kind of a hierarchy of how hard it is on your body. Cyclists definitely, I mean, it's so funny because somebody had texted me the other day about this bicycle race I want to do on my 50th birthday, 50 miles on the 50th anniversary of the race for
Yeah.
my 50th birthday. Pretty sweet, right? And she's like, "Oh, you'll be the baby in your age group." And I'm like, "Not in cycling."
No.
Because
No.
masters age group, is totally different in cycling than it is in triathlon, because really, like, we can hold it together much longer in
Don't
cycling.
they don't they put you, or put us in like isn't it like a 40 to 50 or something like that, or
Yeah,
is it 30?
it's
Yeah.
usually like 10-year breakdown. In triathlon it's 5.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
yeah.
that's not bad. So I guess now, like, I always hear about like free radicals, and does that have anything to do with aging and at all? Like, what are free radicals? Like, I'm like, oh, I should take antioxidants because they say, you know, it helps combat free radicals.
Yeah. Well, free radicals are the things that are kind of on our food stuff that our liver has to cut off
Uh-huh.
to make whatever that nutrient was into sugar or fat or whatever. We
Yeah.
talked about it last week, like using protein for sugar creates ketones. Well, ketones are free radicals.
Oh, wow.
They're an oxygenated hydrogen group floats around and it wants to fill those electrical charges. So kind of like a car sitting in the junkyard rusting, when you've got those oxygenated ketones floating around in the system, it's wanting to grab off other chemicals from you to complete it so that it's inert, in other words.
Yeah.
So that's not good because it's kind of breaking you down so that it's not floating around having an electrical charge anymore. So that's why we want to eat stuff that helps clear the system from that. But really what's better is to stay away from eating things that are oxidative.
Oh, I'm going to have to ask, what's one thing you would stay away from that's oxidative?
Oh gosh.
So then I would stay away from it too.
Well, trying to burn sugar from protein or alcohol is pretty bad for you. I mean, they can be converted in a pinch, yeah, but we don't want to do it on a regular basis because it really creates those free radicals.
Yeah, I was looking at MyFitnessPal, and then I was like trying to keep up, making sure that I was eating enough because I started thinking, I was like, how much have I even eating? And then I noticed I was eating like, I have a sneaking suspicion, training like 10, 12, 13 hours a week. I was only taking in like 16 to 1700 calories.
Ooh,
and then I was like, oh man, what's going on? Like, I kind of feel crappy. And then I kind of came up with an estimate. So then I started doing the MyFitnessPal to make sure I'm at least taking in over 2,000. But I started noticing I only take in like 9 grams of sugar a day.
Yeah, that's pretty good. It's pretty good.
Yeah. So then I started wondering, like, I know this is like a different topic, but okay, we have carbs that get broken down into glycogen into your bloodstream, but I don't need refined sugar at all, do I? I could completely be without it.
Totally. You can get into those complex carbohydrates and manufacture sugar, and they're better for you because they don't spike that insulin really high because they don't, they're these really, really long groups of sugars added together. So you have to break them apart, and that creates energy right there. And then you have stored energy. So when I say complex carbs, you've talked about it before, your sweet potatoes, quinoa, long grain rice, the stuff that doesn't have a lot of starch, but takes some time to digest. One of the best supplements on the market is Generation UCAN. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's a cornstarch that has been cooked in such a way that it actually it makes the starch is longer rather than shorter. So when you ingest it, it sits there. It takes a longer amount of time to break it down in the gut. Yeah, it's a pretty cool invention. It was actually developed for kids that have a condition called glycogen depletion, which means they can't even store sugar at all.
Oh, wow. And that's insane. I've never heard of that.
Yeah. So these kids were dying at really young age. And the founder of the company, their son has it. And it's, he's lived up into his 20s now. And it's broken into the sports world. It's just a great supplement if you don't have issues with corn.
Yeah. And the thing of that is also too, like maybe people don't realize your brain has to have carbohydrates or glycogen. Yeah. So then if you're depleted and then your brain can't get enough of that, it's history.
Right. And that's what bonking. That's what bonking is. Basically, it's kind of your body shutting down so that your brain can stay online.
Oh yeah.
Survival.
But also too, like with aging athletes, I always hear about like losing lean muscle mass. Is there like a specific kind of training or workouts that we could do to prevent from losing muscle?
Cycling in particular, which sport you're in, I'll use that one for reference. You don't really go against the forces of gravity as much as you would, striking the ground running.
Yeah.
So you got to be careful of losing your bone density and your muscle density there. Gravity actually is kind of our helper in those cases. But what you can do is the heavy lifting, the resistance training, lifting heavy weight, doing multi-joint
Yeah.
stuff like deadlifts and squats and bench press, pulls, that sort of thing, that create that muscle mass and bone density.
So then like picking up heavy stuff is going to keep you from losing your muscle mass. So then keep working out. And then you think like more explosive stuff since we're
we want to do it in a periodized way though. I mean, you want to pair it with where you're at in your cycle for training. So if you're out doing long aerobic base workouts, probably going to be prohibitive to be doing short explosive sets. You want to do more muscular endurance. If you're doing the speed work, then it makes sense to go back to the heavy sets again. So I'll have my folks like cycle off season, lift heavy so that they're getting back into doing form correction. Nothing like a heavy weight to make you squat right.
Oh yeah.
Right. But then, during the periodization, as it changes, then we will change how many sets and how many reps we would do.
Well, I worked with someone, Ian.
Yeah. Good kid.
And he had me like take a step back and like taught me how to do squats proper and like kind of really worked with me. And the whole time he was working with me, a lot of like I have some hip issues, like not issues, like I get like this tight muscle just from sitting in front of a computer. And then he worked with me. And then as long as I was on his program and doing exactly what he said, like I had zero pain. And then, I kind of got out of that as I started shifting my training, like more cycling. I kind of got the tight hip thing coming back again. And then I started doing planks. I'd get up from my computer, especially since I'm working at home now with the pandemic. I'll get up and do like 2-minute planks and then, sit back down for a minute. And then now I can kind of like manage it a little bit more since I'm at home. I can get up, do sit-ups, get up, do planks. And then it keeps it from like getting so bad. So then kind of like I've always heard people like talking about sarcopenia. Is that something that all aging athletes get, or is that a disease, or is that just the process of like losing lean muscle mass as we get older?
It's the process of losing lean muscle mass as we get older. Yeah.
It sounds horrible.
You can prevent it to some. That's a scary name, doesn't it? Sarcopenia. No, you can prevent it to some degree, but eventually it's going to outrun you. But, I don't know how many people that are up in their 70s and 80s and able to do some astounding things. Not so long ago, there was some woman that was like 82 years old that set the world record for the 100-meter sprint.
Oh, wow.
Love that stuff. That's so great because she's still being active. She's not sitting in her wheelchair and having to do one-sided leg lifts, to try to strengthen her muscles. She's actually out doing. So I think the more active you can become in your middle ages, the longer you're at least productive in your old age. But at some point you're going to start losing muscle mass. There's nothing you can do about it.
Well, like my dad, I don't want to get this wrong, he'll kill me, but he's 71.
Okay.
So he had rheumatoid arthritis, and just through diet and continuing on his exercise plan, he's kind of on a training plan too. He's a cyclist. He does mountain bike and he road bikes as well. I mean, he's like 71, still putting in centuries, like averaging like 15 to 16 miles an hour by himself, which is good for, a 71-year-old. And then also too, like he was able to go into remission with rheumatoid arthritis just through diet and continuing to exercise. And then now he was on methotrexate and he was able to come off that. I think he's completely off of it actually. And then he had a doctor say, well, it must not have been rheumatoid arthritis because you can't go into remission with that. And he did.
I disagree.
And my dad was like, I completely have, he's like, look at me, dude. Cause his hands were, he's got like a few knuckles that are like, kind of like weird or whatever.
Yeah.
But the dude is 71 years old, going on mountain bike rides with my older brother in Birmingham. like doing like 2-hour shred sessions with my older brother, just killing it at 70, which is 71. And that's just unreal. So by modern, like the way people think, it's like, oh, well, if you're over the age of like 25 or you hit 30, it's done. And then my
Yeah.
dad's still killing it.
Yeah. No, I think that's awesome. Good for him. And I think you can do a lot to kind of hold off those processes of aging. Certainly. Yeah. Unfortunately, a lot of people don't try to do that until, some of the things have already kind of gone offline. Yeah.
Oh,
it's
yeah.
unfortunate. Yeah.
Yeah. They wait till they're like, my age or whatever, and they have some, life altering situation, and then they wait and then start like doing, exercising and doing all this stuff. And then it's so hard on them, they can't do it more than a couple of times a week, right? Because it takes them forever to recover because they've never really done anything. So then it's kind of weird for, someone who's never really trained. I've had people like kind of jack with me that are my age about me still getting after it and me still pushing hard and me still having, dreams of like winning and all this stuff. It's like, they're like, dude, you need to get married and settle down. I'm like, the last thing I need to do is be a domesticated man. I got to stay a freaking wild animal. So this is what's up. This is how I'm doing it. We're going to shred until there ain't nothing left in me.
Yeah, well, even if you were to find the right girl, you're not happy unless you're being Chris, right? So
yeah, exactly.
You might as well just be Chris.
Yeah, so we just they come and go. I'm like, all right, that's cool. We'll see you later. Yeah.
Oh, God.
So when we start to lose muscle mass, does it get replaced with fat?
No. You only have a finite amount of muscle, and you only have a finite amount of adipose tissue. Now, your muscle atrophies, and because you're being more sedentary, then you put on body fat, but it doesn't replace cell for cell. Yeah.
So what is
kind of a misnomer?
Is adipose tissue? Is that fat?
It's your fat cells. Yeah.
So you can you actually get, when you lose fat, when you get fatter, do you actually have more adipose tissue? And then when you lean up, do you get less, or is it still there? Just, does it contract? And
the only way you lose adipose tissue is going in and having like liposuction, where they suck the fat cells out, right?
So Hollywood.
Right. They're meant to create storage for you, and they're all over your body, but they shrink. If you're eating and exercising and getting lean, those cells get smaller. But if you're sitting around and you're putting potato chips in your mouth every time you sit down on the couch, then those cells kind of swell up.
So then some person can't say, they're like, well, you're just lucky. I have more fat cells than you.
That's totally false.
Okay. Yeah. I've heard people say, oh, it's just easy for you. I'm like, how can it be easy for me? I've got hypothyroid. I had most of my pancreas hacked out. Like, right. I mean, physically, I'm a piece of junk.
I think what's made it easier for you is because you've had to make a lifestyle out of it, right? You learned at a very young age that you're going to have to be different.
Yeah.
But, I'm like you. I don't even have a thyroid. And I should, by all medical experts, I should be pretty obese, but I'm not. It's just a lifestyle choice. And I will say this, when I had my son, I have an 18-year-old kiddo.
Oh, wow. Cool.
I gained about 48 pounds with that pregnancy, and it took me 14 months to get rid of all 48 pounds. It was hard. It was, but I wasn't going to stop just because it was hard. And I think a lot of people really aren't interested in working that hard at it.
Yeah. I mean, also though, like as we age too, you have to find different ways to achieve your goals. It's like, you can't do the same thing that made you skinny when you were 25. And then when you're 45, be like, oh, well, I cut calories and I did this way and it worked like years ago. It's not going to work for you when you're older. It's like you have to keep redefining yourself, especially when you get older. Like every every few years and like keep researching to find different ways to stay lean. So for me, it's like I had to like, I kind of got a little heavy after my Achilles tendon surgery, and then I couldn't lose the weight, and then I kind of figured it out, and then, you know, got lean again. So
Yeah.
like the thing is like people get stuck in the same rut. They don't realize that you have to like literally, I think you have to redefine yourself every few years. Like the older you get, like maybe when you're younger, it's maybe every 7 to 10. As you start to get older, that window starts to narrow to where like every 5 years, every 3 years, every 4 years, you have to like change it up, I think, often.
Yeah, I have some theories about that too. I think when you're younger and your body does things a little bit easier because it's just capable, right? I think that's where a lot of the damage actually happens, because we might see success and not realizing that we're kind of screwing ourselves over with respect to metabolism. And, you know, like when you're 20 and you stop eating for 3 days, all of a sudden the scale says you're 20 pounds lighter. Yeah, that worked really great at 20. But what you didn't realize you were doing is that you were kind of actually starting to set off some of those metabolic processes that make you age. And so when you're 30, that doesn't work as effectively, right? But you've also broken some other parts by doing that when you were 20.
Mm-hmm.
And so it makes it doubly hard.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think also the other thing that I think is weird is like for me in hypothyroid, when I was younger, I was on 200 micrograms of levothyroxine. My doctor was like, oh my God,
Yeah,
that's so much. That's a huge dose. And I was on that forever. So when I started cutting out refined sugars and started cutting out like all these different kinds of foods that I didn't know that were causing inflammation.
Yeah.
Guess what happened? My dose started dropping. I've gone in the last couple of years, I've gone from 200 to 130, like to like 130 grams of levothyroxine on diet and paying attention to my body. And, you know, there's something to do with some of the foods maybe causing inflammation and doing something. And then, so I've gone from like 200 micrograms to 130, and I have to get my labs done again. And I guarantee it, they're going to drop me down to 100 because I can tell it's still a little bit high.
Does it feel a little high?
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, you know, I mean, yeah, that's absolutely a good signal that, you know, your gut health is much improved. And it probably has everything to do with your dad getting better from the rheumatoid, you know, gut health. And some of these things have some genetic propensity too. It's very likely that your dad's metabolism works quite a bit like yours. And whatever he was consuming was, you know, setting off that autoimmunity that resulted in rheumatoid arthritis for him. But for you, it was hypothyroidism, which is also an autoimmunity.
Yeah, I mean, he's kind of stepped that back. And then I probably talked about my brother having a heart attack, but it was, he had an accident and then had a heart attack. So in the last, like, I think it's 3 years, like his stroke volume, I can't remember what it's called. It's like when it squishes the blood out, like he's increased that significantly. And he's like pretty much like, you know, reverse like a large part of like what they said was going to happen. And they're like, oh man, you're doing good. And then now like Sunday, him and I went out and rode 180 watts for a couple of hours, you know, and he's like 3 years out of a massive heart attack. And so I think like, I mean, it's so much diet. And I think like a lot of what doctors have to go on, they have to go on, you know, people that are saying, yeah, I did this or I did that, but they're not consistently doing it enough. So all the data that they have is skewed. And then they use that to kind of cast judgment on, you know, what other people at a said age would be, because they don't have anyone that's dedicated, you know, for long enough to like really come up with an accurate data set to say that, oh, this person's X, they have this, they have that. This is what you have to do. It's like, I think they're just guessing and they're like, oh, you fit this mold. We're going to give you what do they give heart attack people? The cholesterol medicine?
Sure. They usually give them a statin so that they
Yeah.
lower their, yeah. Well, here's three things that go against you. You got 10 minutes with your doctor because that's what insurance will pay them.
Yeah.
So they try to get in and out of that room as fast as they can.
Yep.
And they're trying to give you the quickest Band-Aid they can. So there's that piece. The other thing is labs are in a normative value. So what that means is they'll take a population of people and then they'll decide based on a bell curve where the normative values should be. So when you live in a state like Tennessee, for example, where people have a little bit more sedentary lifestyle and they eat differently than we do in the Rockies, their normative lab values are going to be vastly different than what they are over here in the Rockies. We live in an extraordinarily healthy population here in Colorado. So our lab normative values are much more stringent. So doctors kind of don't actually pay much attention to that. They just look at the normative values of the region that they're in. So you might be outside of the normative values and still be clinically healthy, or vice versa. You can be within those normative values and actually showing signs of illness, and they're not catching it because you're in those normative values. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I think, again, too, like from my brother's standpoint, having a heart attack, they look at his age. They looked at he had a heart attack. He never had heart disease. So they throw all the things that they would give a typical someone with heart disease at him, and it just doesn't work. And then, 3 years later, he's had to come off the metoprolol, statins, and he's like not on anything anymore. And he feels amazing. So it's just kind of, you can't really blame the doctors because, they don't, that's just what they know. It's like, best guess is what they're doing. This is what we usually do. This is what we were taught to do. So
exactly.
Yeah.
They only have the information that's right in front of them, and they only have 10 minutes with you, which is an unfortunate situation, but that's how it is here in the United States. So, that's kind of a tricky thing. The best thing you can do is be your own advocate from a medical standpoint. Do your research, eat right, do your exercise, and employ all of those systems so that you can be healthier. And it sounds like your brother's done a really good job at that.
Oh, he's done amazing. He's done amazing. He was a Cat 2 road racer, super fit dude, got the bad end of the deal. And if you could imagine, like me and my brother have been running, my little brother have been just running all over the place, skateboarding, racing bicycles, racing motocross since birth. And all of a sudden, boom, you're in ICU. They're telling you got 24 hours to live because you had a heart attack. Wow. And then not only, lucky enough that he made it, but then he's got to live with the day in, day out complications and the fear of, having that happen. So to conquer that and to get back on a bicycle and really good push yourself is just, it's insane. Yeah. And he's in his 40s.
Yeah, it's cool.
He's 45. So, most people might tell a 45-year-old heart attack patient, don't be doing that. Kind of dial it back. I don't know what they would tell them, but the dude doing intervals and now about racing bicycles again.
Yeah.
At 45 after a heart attack. So then that kind of that's kind of jacked up his max heart rate a little bit. Sure. Do you think that will decrease his VO2 max since he doesn't have as high of a heart rate? Forget about the heart attack. So if your max heart rate drops, does that decrease your VO2 max?
It can, but that's not as clear of an answer as you might think. So VO2 is the maximum amount of volume in liters of oxygen that your lungs can absorb. And then your heart has to actually push that to your periphery, right? All your brain and your arms and legs, etc. And then it brings back carbon dioxide after you've burned off the sugar or the fat, right? Those are your wastes. But if you are able to still suck in the same amount of oxygen at a lower heart rate, that's actually a positive adaptation. Lowering threshold, but still absorbing the same amount of oxygen, you're oxygenating your body much more efficiently. So it's a little counterintuitive, right?
Yeah.
But to answer your question the other way, yeah, for sure, it can lower your VO2 if you're not able to maintain as high of a threshold. I have an athlete on my team that has a rapid heartbeat, and we have to watch it because sometimes
What's that mean?
Well, it just means that he could have a stroke, because what happens is then oxygen gets into your bloodstream, and if CO2 and oxygen aren't exchanged at the right rate, it'll create bubbles, okay, in your arteries, which can cause strokes in your brain. So you have
it's not getting that. It's not moving blood proper, because that rapid heartbeat doesn't cause a full contraction.
Right. So what happens is sometimes CO2 gets past the it's supposed to be given back to the lungs to breathe out, but sometimes it doesn't make that transfer because the heartbeat is so rapid. So what happens is it creates kind of air bubbles in the arterial vessels. And so if they get up into the brain, it can cause a stroke.
That's gnarly. I know, like, over my course of time, like even when I was younger, like I had, when I was super young, they put me on Ativan because I had like a heart murmur, like a minor, like little something or another. And they did that to correct it. I know, like, it's pretty rare, but sometimes, like, I might get, like, especially if I get tired, like a little flippity flab, like here and there. That's actually kind of scary, but and then I kind of became aware of like AFib and all this other stuff after watching my brother go through what he did. And then I kind of researched all that stuff. And then it's like you're saying, like rapid heartbeat, like if you got like a weird, like heartbeat that kind of like stuttered enough, it can cause blood to pool in your heart. And then when it goes out, it'll do what you just basically said.
Yeah.
Have a stroke.
Right.
I think.
Right. I mean, I'm not a cardiologist, but there's a whole host of things that can, cause various breakdown between the heart and the brain.
For sure. Yeah. I don't want to put you in a cardiology doctor spot.
I'm not there, but
yeah, it's been fascinating to me.
It's good to kind of be aware of those things and, the signals that you should be watching while you're training. And definitely AFib's one of those. Yeah.
And I got into that too, sort of researching it, because I've heard about some, older athletes just mysteriously having a heart attack, not heart disease, but they go into AFib and have like a heart attack and then die on the spot. And then that kind of freaks me out. I'm like, oh crap. Like, and then that's kind of what brought me into that left ventricle hypertrophy and kind of like drive, trying to find out more information about heart. But yeah, it is kind of creepy. But if you think about like how much work that thing does, I mean, it's insane, man.
Yeah, it's quite a muscle. It really is. Yeah.
So, I mean, why is VO2 max even important? Like, obviously, do you have to have like a super high VO2 max? Because they say like Lance Armstrong, when he won all of his races, his VO2 max was like 73 or something like that.
Yeah, I think I heard 78. It's insanely high. The highest I've ever seen with mine is 64, which is pretty high for a chick.
That's very high. Yeah.
It's not that right now, not this year, but it has a lot to do with the size of your lungs. Like my fiance was a Navy diver, and I feel like, and he's a really, really great triathlete. And just kind of the way he's built, he's broad across the chest, but he's not a big guy. And so he has this big set of lungs, probably, if you were to look internally, and he's got this great big, probably this big heart muscle too. And so he's got a really massively high VO2 for his body size. So when you're a little guy and you can run fast, but you've got really good sized set of lungs and heart, then you're processing oxygen much more efficiently. That's the deal with Lance Armstrong. He's just got this massive set of lungs and heart. Of course, he was doping too.
Oh yeah.
But we can get into that argument.
But see, the deal is with his VO2 max is that Lamont was saying that he had like Greg LeMond had like a naturally high VO2 max of like 82 or something off the hook.
Yeah.
But he was clean. And then, so he said that Lance Armstrong did not have the VO2 max to win the Tour de France. He's like, he has to be doping because his VO2 max is only like mid 70s or high 70s.
Well, Greg LeMond can strike that argument all he wants. We didn't really have the instruments to measure.
Yeah.
I mean, you can get hooked up to a bunch of tubes in a computer and have a metabolic test done, but it's still just an estimation. And the science when he was competing certainly isn't where the science is now. So, I think his argument's a little moot, but it's kind of interesting. I have another athlete who's 6'4" and he weighs 280 pounds, and he's not a little guy, but I have to give him a different threshold test because he just has a massive set of lungs and he can literally outrun a typical threshold test. But for all training purposes, wherever his threshold looks like it should be, it's not accurate because he can't hold those lower intensity intervals. It's kind of interesting. Yeah. So he can kind of fool the threshold tests.
Oh, wow. Yeah. I never heard of such a thing. It's like, man, when I'm doing my threshold tests, I'm freaking pinned and there's like absolutely no fooling. You can look at me and be like, dude, that guy is freaking done.
You're doing it right. I mean, if you really get to if you really get to your true threshold, you should not be able to continue to keep breathing. You should pass out.
Oh yeah. Which kind of gets me to wanting to like actually, and because if I do a ramp test or a 20-minute, I should be able to do my threshold for an hour. So since, there's really, really no racing, I kind of want to go out sometime and see if I can actually do my threshold for an hour. Yeah.
Wow. Ooh. Those Tour de France cyclists can do it for about 18 minutes. And that's considered a positive adaptive. That's like as far as people can go at threshold.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Yeah. That's insane. Yeah. Yeah.
So an hour? I don't think so, Chris, but you could go try. Just make sure that you got like your phone on alert. So if you go down.
So if my FTP is 226, so is functional threshold power different than what you're talking about?
Yeah, I'm talking about true threshold, which means where you completely stop processing oxygen.
Okay. Yeah. Never mind. I'm not going to do that one. You know what I think? I think for that one, I think if you can do that for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
You're doing good because I know like VO2 max intervals, they say you should be able to do for like 6 minutes, which I've done 6 minutes before and it hurts.
Yeah, you see spots.
I am not going to be doing 18 minutes.
Yeah, right. Yeah, but they say the best cyclists in the world can get up to about 18 minutes of true threshold work, which is insane to me because, I'm lucky if I can hold 4 minutes.
I think I'm right in there, like 4 to 6 minutes, doing the intervals on that trainer, but I got to be really motivated and really focused. And it's like, I come in like after a rest day and I might do that, then easy. And then like what I consider threshold work would be like FTP, like 226 for an hour.
Sure. Watts are better anyway than heart rate because it's more of a constant. It doesn't change.
Yeah.
Heart rate's kind of variable based on stressors. But, FTP is set up to be somewhere between 92 and 95% of your true threshold. So that's something to consider also.
That sounds gnarly. What do you think the typical VO2 max for a master's athlete is?
Ooh, well.
Or what would be a good one for a master's athlete?
Depends on your size, truly. Like, I think I weigh 125 pounds. I'm 5'8". Mine last year at peak was 64. And that's insanely high. That put me in like the top 0.02%. I think if you're in the top 10%, that's a good place to be. But it really does have to do more with your height and weight and age. All three of those metrics, not just age.
So do you think because I'm only 5'5", and I don't weigh much at all. I'm a freaking horse jockey. I'm embarrassed about how little I weigh.
Don't be.
But like I think I weigh like 122 pounds. but Strava has my VO2 max at 68.
That's pretty good. It's pretty good.
And I'm
Chris.
freaking 47.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
And I mean, I've kind of like monkeyed around and then looked online. I'm like, oh, what's typical? What's good? Supposedly, based on what Garmin's, and only I would be nerdy enough to sit around and read stuff like this, like, Garmin's definition of VO2 max. I'm like, oh, well, how are they what algorithm are they using to calculate this? Is this even close to being accurate? And then, figuring out like what company actually owns that actually supplies them with the algorithm to calculate the VO2 max. Like, that's where I am. I'm like down the rabbit hole. So like 50s, like, 50 to 55 puts you, just like you said, I think it's like up into that 10% range for our age group.
Somewhere I have a chart let me see if I can find it really quick. I should have been prepared to have that in front of me, but
no, it's cool. Like, I'm such a nerd. Like, I'll just sit here and like just read like actual like crazy papers on this stuff.
Normative values for men in there, 40 to 49. Anything above 48 VO2 is considered superior.
Dude, my brother, the one that my little brother that had the heart attack, he's rocking a 53 after
awesome.
a heart attack.
Yeah, that's incredible. And that's great because you've really undone some of the damage that, was there. That's awesome.
Well, I do know he was like definitely in the 70s. And then we were both like probably right up in that area, like in the younger years. But like I was looking through some tests that I'd done like at Boulder Sports Clinic back when I was like 30. And I think I did like a 61, and that was actual like mask on ramp test. And then that kind of got me wondering. I'm like, well, if I was 30 and I was 60 and I'm 47 and I'm 68, how the heck does that even make sense? So then that kind of led me into this performance declining with age. And so I'm like, dude, how is this possible? Then I started trying to like figure out like how accurate Garmin was, like what they were using to calculate it. And I think it's within like a few percent.
It's pretty close. I've had the metabolic testing done as well with the mask measuring oxygen and carbon dioxide. And my I would say it's pretty close. Usually it calculates my threshold where I think it is. And, and then based on that, typical with VO2. So I think that algorithm works pretty well. The problem with Garmin is that a lot of people use the wrist enabled, and it's not quite as good as a chest strap.
Yeah, because you don't get as accurate of a heart reading.
Yeah.
One thing
I've
noticed,
works well enough.
Yeah, speed definitely has a play, and power actually has a play in it, and heart rate has a play in it. So I've gone out and done like a massive amount of intervals, come back 68, and then gone out and ridden, like a really hard, good like zone 2 day, come back 68, and then I've gone out for a zone 2 day with a slower speed with a higher heart rate and then be it at 63. So I tried to figure out like what it was actually doing or what was going on. It's something to do with speed, percentage of max heart rate versus your threshold.
Right. Well, and how much time you spend up in the upper echelon of your zones too. I mean, usually if you're in zone 2 and you're running a little high, that tells me that you're in that parasympathetic state where you need recovery.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking. And I thought like, hey man, this is actually pretty cool because I actually do feel tired. I felt labored when I was riding. So it's picking that up because I'm not using as much of my VO2. Yeah. So it knows you're tired, your heart rate's up, your speed's down.
Right. When you see that diminish in VO2, that alert on your watch, that's a signal right there that says, oh, you need a little more recovery than you've been giving yourself.
Yeah. And then you got the Garmin recovery check. If it says fair, and I started thinking that using the VO2 calculations and all the business to come up with how recovered you are. And then
Yeah.
also too, it looks like, well, you did a 300 TSS. It's just going to take you 72 hours to recover, or like whatever it is. And you're, you're like, you're like trying to ride the next day. It's like, come on, it'll go ahead and say recovery poor.
Yeah.
Just on
Right.
the hours. It's going to, as a matter of fact, it's going to tell you to go home.
Yeah. Yeah. I know. And you should listen
Yeah.
to it. It's hard though. It's kind of hard to rewire our brains because like we just, I don't know. I had a coach in high school that just thought every day was supposed to be hard, 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 hard all the time. And,
Yeah.
I don't think that we as athletes improve much because we never got any recovery. And you got to have that recovery because that's what's, creating your aerobic base.
Yeah. Yeah. Cause you got to rest as hard as you train. That's for sure. And that's one thing I do now is like I get my Monday and I'm just laid out. I don't do anything. I don't look at computers.
Yeah.
Do anything. And as long as I rest proper from that, like my Tuesday, I'll usually do like some sort of sweet spot ride or like a really good zone 2. And then that day, while I'm rested, I'll wind up with the lower VO2 max, which is weird. And then when I go out the second day, I have a higher VO2 max. And then third day, it'll probably be about the same. Fourth, and then fifth, it'll start to
diminish. And that's a signal. Yeah. Time to take some time off.
So, if I'm going to be paying money for these tools, it's like a lot of times, like I feel like I'm like, okay, well, let's just figure these things out and see how accurate they are. And I think they work. Like if you pay attention to what they're saying, I think if they say you need to rest, then you probably need to rest, especially someone like Garmin for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I think those tools are useful for people that are really not paying attention or in
Yeah.
tune with their body. I don't know about you, but I have some people that I just have to rein in all the time. Like I'll prescribe a low intensity run and they'll go out and just crush it. And it'll come in and I'll get VO2 updates. And that wasn't the prescription for the day.
Yeah.
So what happens is they're constantly toggling back and forth, VO2 threshold this day, lower, then the next day higher, and then lower. And they never see any improvement because they're just like right here all the time. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I think those are really good tools for those folks that can't really pay attention to that otherwise.
Yeah, I think like a lot of my downfall in my younger years is I didn't listen to what my coaches were saying. I probably rode a little bit harder than I should have. But now it's weird because I ride a hell of a lot harder than I've ever done. I don't know if it's just because I've been doing it for so long that my body's just like, okay, cool. This is what you're going to do. It's cool.
Well, you're doing it with more periodization. Again, it's like that discussion of what we know now versus what we knew then.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I think for me, that's been part of the reason I just seem to get faster because I understand better periodization and I, really valuing the slow days. What do they say? Go slow, really slow on your slow days. Go really, really fast on your fast days.
Yeah, that's what I've always heard. And speaking of fast, so do you think if athletes maintain a high exercise training intensity that will keep their VO2 max from diminishing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but you only need about 20% of your training time budgeted towards that high intensity. The rest of it should be down low. I mean, not so low that you're like, pull out the lawn chair. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about, staying in that fat burning state, using oxygen, but, spending about 12 to 20% of your time up at threshold to really strengthen the heart muscle.
Yeah. And that kind of gets me to thinking about HRV.
Yeah. I kind of touched on it.
Yeah.
So it was actually developed in Russia for the cosmonaut program there. And what they were doing is conditioning these guys and paying attention to low and high heart rates. And in our central nervous system, we have one side that, we operate by thinking about, like, you talking to me, that's in that realm of your nervous system. And then you have the other side of your nervous system that runs everything that you can't think about, like heartbeat, digestion, cellular process. What happens is when we're super tired, our heart rate will actually run a little bit higher at rest because it's trying to repair it's trying to kind of prioritize all of those things that we don't think about. We're kind of in survival mode, if you will. So HRV is a great tool because it'll alert the athlete, okay, you've gone too far. You need to take a day off. Whether your training plan says you should or shouldn't, you need to take a training day off. It actually saved an athlete of mine's life a few years back. I had this athlete that was training to summit Everest. And she was a beast. She was a badass. It didn't matter what I gave her. She would crush it. She was such a good athlete. But she started getting sick a lot and exhibiting symptoms of respiratory illness. And she started to recover, and then she'd come back for a training session, and then she'd be sick again. And this went on for weeks. And finally, they did some blood testing, and she had been to India 6 months before, and she had tuberculosis. I don't think we would have figured that out if she hadn't been using her HRV. Because we started to see is that she'd get these low HRV scores about 2 or 3 days before she'd get symptomatic with this illness. So she thought she was getting a cold. And then, we'd back off the training for 2 or 3 days because her HRV told her to. And then she'd end up getting sick. It was crazy.
Oh, that's weird.
Cycle. Yeah. But
so then how did she just finally one day go to the doctor, or did she just catch it like immediately, be like, well, I feel like I'm getting sick? And then, cause I don't know how that goes. Does that like just get bad quick, or you start to get some symptoms and then you kind of go downhill, or like? Well,
that one, you can be sick for months before you even know you have it. It's even worse than COVID. Fortunately, it's bacterial and it can be treated with antibiotics, but, and it's fairly transmissible too. So it's kind of scary because I got exposed to it, but at any rate,
dude, I did not know that was contagious.
Yeah, it is.
That's scary.
But I think after the second time that it happened, she got some yellow scores, and I said, all right, you need to take 2 or 3 days off. And then she got sick the second time. I said, something's wrong. You need to go to the doctor. So she did. And then we went through a third cycle, and she was insistent with her doctor because her labs came back kind of normal. Not clinically, I'm like in those parameters of being clinically okay, but right on the edge. And I said, something's not right. This is now 3 times. So go back, press harder. And she had the blood work done, and she had TB.
See, I always kind of think I'm like, knock on wood, I've been good for like a long time, minus the hypothyroid thing. So now that I'm getting closer to 50, like anytime like I feel something, I'm like, oh God, what next? Even though it's been like, I got hypothyroid in my, I think like late 20s. So, I mean, I like knock on wood, knock on everything. Like I've had it pretty good. So, but I've heard of people that are like healthy, like, most of their life. And then all of a sudden they're just like, find out that they got like some crazy illness or something. And then, that's scary, because you would think that like, if you're healthy and you're out riding bicycles, you're out doing all this stuff, then everything would be good. But sometimes
you can't live in a state of fear, right? You can't control what you don't know. All you can do is take care of yourself today. And that, I think that's the best psychological outlook you can have on that, which is, hey, I'm going to take care of this vehicle I'm in today and do the best job I can so that tomorrow I might get to wake up.
Yeah. And I'm stoked like every day that I do wake up. And I think like a lot of times, like when, like we've never been in a pandemic, we've never had this kind of thing going on. So it kind of makes you paranoid about everything. And then you hear about like how horrible it is, and it basically suffocates you. And like you were saying, like it basically reproduces in your red blood cells. So it shuts the oxygen transportation down to like organs, your, whatever need. So that's scary. So then every time I'm like, oh, I don't think I can breathe good today. So like, I'm like, oh wait, dude, it's allergy season. Take a step back.
I know. It's hilarious. I do the same thing. I'm like, that's tickling in the back of my throat. Do I have a headache? Maybe I should go take my temperature. Do I have a fever?
Yeah. But also too, for me, it's like, I'm like, all right, my nose is itching, tickle in my throat, headache. Okay. That's probably allergies, but also never get a headache. So if I had a headache, I'd probably freak out.
Yeah. Yeah. I get stupid seasonal migraines. So it's got me really freaking out right now.
I mean, I think everyone probably is freaking out. Like everyone's on edge a little bit. I think people are dealing with it a little bit, better. Like see people in the grocery store, they're not like jumping to like get away from you, and people are just walking by with their masks on and have gotten used to it. But did you hear that the shelter in place ban was lifted?
Well, it's May 4th.
Okay.
Retail gets to go back to work on May 4th, but they can only do curbside. We're still going to have to wear masks when we're outside. We're probably going to have to wear masks through the summer, which means racing with masks on.
Oh, yeah. I've actually heard 12 to 18 months before this thing got settled out.
Yeah. I mean, they're still saying that they project somewhere between 80 and 85% of the population will wind up getting this. But they're hoping that by flattening the curve and slowing that transmission rate down, that gives them more likelihood of making sure more people survive it. That's key right there. It's really just slowing the process down. It's going to get through our population no matter what we do. It'll be back in the fall, but we're trying our darndest to outrace it with a vaccine. And I really think that's what's going on with the government. All kinds of people have all sorts of conspiracy theories and whatnot, but
it's what is it, 5G?
Yeah, right.
5G, right. It's a 5G apocalypse.
Well, it's interesting because like my fiance is directly involved with the Army, and then I have a friend actually that is an epidemiologist that is heavily involved in this development of the vaccine too. So I have some little bit of inside stuff. I can't know a lot because, some of this stuff is still considered protected and the population can't know it. But I can tell you this, really, that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to outrace the virus and get us a vaccination so that we can have herd immunity. And it will be more like the flu next year. But we've got to slow the transmission down to get there.
I've definitely heard weird stuff like, like I was saying, like 5G's causing it. And then I've heard like, I've heard it called the plandemic. And then, like it was planned. And I'm like, and then all these conspiracy people always say they, and I'm like, who is they?
Who is they? I mean,
who would take time to plan this?
Well, and what politician, by the way, is going to benefit in any way from this? Like, those are the most unpopular people of all right now.
Yeah.
Why would they want to do that? It doesn't make any sense. And it doesn't create any financial gain for anyone. Anyone. I mean, I have a friend that works for Medtronic, which is a medical device company, and she got laid off on Friday. She's medical.
Oh, man.
She got laid off. Like everything is struggling. So why would we do this on purpose? Who does it benefit?
And why would someone like purposely let this virus go when they have loved ones out there that could contract it and die too? So it just doesn't make any sense to me that it was planned or intentional. But I did hear something that was interesting, not to completely jump topics, but a lot of time, like a lot of the people that had flu vaccinations are the ones that wind up getting like deathly ill from COVID.
Huh. I haven't heard that one.
Yeah. It was on the plandemic thing. It was like, yeah. It was like some hardcore conspiracy stuff. I was like laying on the couch, like looking at YouTube and like watching podcasts. And I'm like, what's this? What are they talking about? The plandemic. So then I watched it, and then I heard like all about the 5G apocalypse and all this stuff. And I'm like, I was sitting there looking at my phone, and I was like, I threw it across the room. I was like, get away from me.
Well, the one that's on Netflix is actually really good. That's a really good documentary. That it's like 45 minutes long. That's a good one. I feel like that's got good information, and it's put together in such a way that most people can understand it. But the one that really drives me nuts is the two doctors from California, from Bakersfield, that are ER doctors, and they're working in an urgent care, and they're not epidemiologists, and they're talking about herd immunity. And I'm like, it's like asking an electrician to do your plumbing. ER doctors are not trained in epidemiology. Cardiologists are not trained to be infectious disease docs. Like, stop asking the wrong people for advice.
Yeah, there's like anti-aging people like giving advice on COVID. And, like all these people that have nothing to do with infectious disease, like telling you how you should eat and, like what's going on. And, so people are like grabbing it, like whoever and whatever they can to get information. But
I know. Yeah.
do older athletes have a lower HRV score? Or could you use HRV to be a marker of healthy aging? That's what I'm getting at.
Probably. I don't know enough about it. Here's what I do know. Endurance athletes usually have the highest scores. Doesn't matter what their age is. Like marathoners typically have the highest HRV scores out there. It's because they're training every day for long hours. That's what gets you a higher HRV score. So I think it's probable that older athletes can have a high HRV score. It just kind of depends on what you're training for. But to be completely honest, I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, I just saw some random schmandom article about, someone trying to use HRV to tell if they were aging healthy, and I don't know, seemed like something cool to talk about. But what do you think about fitness age being more important than chronological age? That's my last question for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not a typical 49-year-old, and my fiance is not a typical 61-year-old. I mean, he can kick a lot of 40-year-old cyclist butts on the bike.
Oh, yeah.
No joke. The guy has an FTP at 250. So,
wow.
He's a beast. But I know lots of people that are 49 and actually look 60. So it goes both ways. Yeah. So I think fitness age is really, I mean, here's the thing. You don't know how many days you got on this earth.
You do not.
And every day you get up is a blessing, right? But you should live your life with intent to be the best, healthiest individual that you can be.
That's how I roll.
Deep thoughts.
Going deep on the What's Up podcast show.
Yeah.
You heard it here. Well, I really appreciate you coming on the show again. I had a lot of fun as usual. And man, I learned a lot. I believe we covered it all, from COVID to we got it all in there that time.
We were all over the place tonight. I hope it flows for everybody.
Yeah. You can't always be on a perfect 1, 2, 3. It's better to kind of you got to get some stuff in there for sure.
That's right. It's supposed to be a conversation.
Yep.
Right on.
Well, I appreciate it, and thank you. And
you're welcome.